Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Strength Coach TV. Normally I take you inside some of the country's best gyms, give you a tour, sit down with the owner, we talk some shop. Today what I did was I flew out to Detroit to film some facilities, and I took advantage of what I felt was a unique opportunity to get some guys together, some guys who have really great experience, and talk about youth training. So we have Jim Kielbaso. He's actually the president of the IYCA, the International Youth Conditioning Association. Brian Sipotz, who's the owner of Advantage Strength in Ann Arbor. And Brian is also grew up as an elite hockey player and played in college, Division I, and went on to the pros. So I think he brings a unique perspective as well. And Darryl Nelson, the strength and conditioning coach for the USA Hockey National Development Team. And so Darryl's been working for 16 years with these 16 and 17 and a little bit of 18-year-olds, just kind of with these players. So I thought getting the three of them together would be a good opportunity to talk about youth training, talk about where we're at right now, some things we're doing right, some things we're doing wrong, and how we can get it better and where we're going with this. So let's head out to Detroit to sit down with Jim Kielbaso, Brian Sipotz, and Darryl Nelson. Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Strength Coach TV. I'm in Hockey Town. I'm in Detroit for, I'm going to film some regular episodes, but while I had these guys here, I wanted to get a little roundtable going, talking about some youth training. So I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves. Brian, you go first.
Okay, my name is Brian Sipotz. I formerly was a professional hockey player, and then within the last 5 years here, I opened my own place called Advantage Strength and Conditioning, and we're doing a lot of youth training and expanding into the adult markets now. But you know, I've just enjoyed the ride as a business owner and a former athlete.
Cool. Darryl?
Oh, name's Darryl Nelson. I'm strength and conditioning coach for the USA Hockey National Team Development Program. I've been here since the year 2000, in the same position, and we're happy to be moved to our new arena here in Plymouth.
Nice, beautiful place, loving it. By the way, these two guys, they run and own hockeystrengthandconditioning.com as well. So if you train hockey players, you gotta check that site out. Jim?
And I'm Jim Kielbaso. I am the director of Total Performance Training Center in Wixom, Michigan, and the president of the International Youth Conditioning Association.
Cool. So for me, I was excited to do this because you know, when we thought about the round table, we were, you know, just missing is the bourbon, but you know, the diverse background, like, you know, you growing up as a, you know, player and you know, and making it to a high level, and then opening a facility, so you're kind of seeing, you know, you had your one path, and then you're seeing how you can help those kids. Obviously, Darryl, for 16 years working with USA Hockey, you've kind of been able to kind of see the way the changes have come about. And then Jim, working with athletes for so long, and now president of IYCA, so I figured we get some good responses here. So let's start out, and I think I'll let Darryl start out with this one. How you feel like training has changed. I was going to say 10 years, but let's go with 16 years for you right now.
16 years. Well, for me, with the players that I work with, you know, when I started, it was very rare to have a guy come in that had ever trained before, that had ever really lifted weights.
Yeah.
That worked with the strength and conditioning coach. And the ones that had usually weren't very good. Like, they really couldn't Olympic lift, and they really didn't know how to squat and do deadlifts, you know, hip hinge and those kinds of things. As to where now, everybody that comes in just about has had a strength coach in some capacity already. The quality is still really mixed. You know, some guys are really great, some guys are really poor. But that's the biggest thing that changed, is that people are starting to figure it out, that it's important and that it's going to make a difference. And so they're getting their son or daughter or whoever it may be with somebody. They're doing something. Yeah. As to where, you know, when I started, it was very rare for anybody to do any, you know, they just played their hockey and they played baseball and they did their stuff, and they never really did strength and conditioning. Yeah. You know, it was non-existent.
Even if they don't even have a coach, I mean, now it's like worst case scenario, the dad can, you know, buy the gym leader set and put it in the basement, and you know, YouTube and different products, and hockeystrengthconditioning.com or strengthcoach.com or gym site. But Jim, why don't you go next, and how you've seen this change? And I guess this is probably a question for you in terms of like the direction, where's it going to go as well, but we'll talk about that.
So we won't go there yet.
Yeah.
So what I've seen over like the last 15, 20 years, so when we opened up our training center, kind of the whole thrust of it was having to educate people as to what the heck we were doing. So this would have been like early 2000s.
Yeah.
We had to explain to parents and coaches like how we could actually help. And it was kind of like telling them, hey, we're taking the stuff that I did as a college coach and other people that I had working for me in colleges, and now we're bringing it to the younger kids. And it was more of an education thing. Now it's turned into more like where everybody kind of knows what sports performance and strength and conditioning is. Now it's more educating them about like the right things to do and who's good and who's not good, and why you should train, you know, a certain way or do certain things versus, you know, should you train, period, and why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So to me, that's been a huge change. The actual training itself has gotten, kind of like Darryl alluded to, it's gotten way better in some ways, and then in other ways you still have a lot of people who are out there training kids who just watched videos on YouTube, or they were, I'm not trying to say this to mess with Brian at this point because it's going to come off that way, but like they were a former player of something, and then they didn't have, you know, they didn't know what to do, so they just said, well, I'll start training kids, but they didn't do the education like that Brian did going into it. And so they are just taking kind of like stuff that they did. You know, maybe they played, you know, here for USA Hockey, and they learned what to do from Darryl, and then they decide, well, now I'm going to teach kids how to do it, and they have no idea.
Exactly.
So they're just kind of you know, going off of their past experiences rather than really truly educating themselves.
I would say it's not even that. If they took bits and pieces of what Darryl taught them and started teaching that to kids, then they're probably on the right path. It's the guys like, for example, if I hadn't met Darryl, if I hadn't run into him in the very beginning of when I started my business, we would be in a very different place, because you're exactly right. A lot of athletes will take what they did in college and apply it to kids now. And so for me, you know, you and I have talked about that evolution of training thing. For me, growing up, you know, I knew you should go to the gym, and then you sort of stand around and you're like watching people do the, you know, the tricep extension machine. You're like, all right, I'll do some of that. Mix that in there. So then, you know, you end up learning by just watching other people, or learning from someone who did it back when they played football in high school. So, you know, that was sort of what I would have done if it wasn't for some nudging in a different direction.
How was your training when you were younger and wherever you were training? And again, you ended up at a high level. So how was the training when you were kind of growing up, or when it was that time to train?
I remember going to the gym with my dad. He sort of dragged me there. He's like, "You're doing this," and they were basically bodybuilding programs. You know, really high rep, relatively lightweight type of programs. And then high school, I went to a boarding school, and I played a different sport each season. So that was the training. Basically. And then you know, then once you got to college, then you get the full strength and conditioning program, but it was, you know, mirrored the football program. So it was all back squats, and we had excellent strength coaches with the Saints now. Dan Dalrymple, and he was a freaking awesome strength coach, and I was stronger than I've ever been in my life, but I always kind of say it was more like a bulldozer than a sports car. So, you know, that's
what year was that, by the way?
2000. 2000 to 2004.
Good. So again, the information that we've amassed over the last 16 years too has been just amazing, right? I mean, considering like what was even the best strength coaches back then, right? I mean, we've all evolved, obviously.
I know there's still a big disconnect, like these guys have alluded to, that people always want to do what they did when they played, and I don't understand it, because nobody else wants to do what they did 15 years ago in anything else.
Yeah.
Nobody wants a 15-year-old car. Nobody wants a rotary dial phone. You know, nobody wants those. Nobody wants the big TV that sticks out this far from the wall, right? Yeah. But people cling to the way they trained when they played. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me.
You're right. It's funny.
The flip side of that, though, Anthony, is I think that, so you've got that one extreme where people are doing what they used to do, and then I think what's kind of happened is now people are trying to make stuff up.
Yeah.
So they're trying to make a name for themselves by doing something that's never been done, even though we don't need to necessarily do that. Yeah. You know, so people are making up exercises, they're making up training philosophies and programs, almost so that kids can run through their program, not so that the person can train kids. And so at least maybe like 15 years ago, or even, you know, more recent than that, people were training kids because they were there training kids and helping the kids. Now there's more and more you see with social media, with everybody having a platform like 24 hours a day. Yeah. People are now more than just trying to do what's right for the kids. They're trying to make a name for themselves by doing something that no one else is doing.
Sure. Or being contrarian, another kind of approach that they'll take too.
It's the same, I think it's the same root problem, like we had alluded to. People aren't educating themselves, and so they don't understand the why of training. They have some capacity where they know the how. Yeah. They're doing what they did 20 years ago when they played, or they created their own training. But there's no reason as to why they're doing it that way, just because that's the way they do it.
Yeah. What are some things we're doing right that you're not you or us? What are some things that you think are out there that people are doing? At least we're getting it right.
Well, I think, you know, one of the biggest things is that people are understanding the importance of training now. You know, because Jim laid the groundwork by educating masses of people, because the IYCA does a great job of that. People understand now why they train, like why training is important. It's like, well, my kid plays soccer, they practice 4 days a week. He's good. Like he's pretty tired. He doesn't have room for any other training. Yeah. But then, you know, or you think about like a Mike Boyle bucket idea, and that's been a pretty good way to pitch that to people. Is saying, you know, athletes need these certain skills. So we talk about, yes, your soccer skills are going to be important, but we have this bucket over here that's not getting any attention. So I think the education has come a long way and is encouraging people to train outside their sport for general athletic development. And, you know, it's good for the athletes. It happens to be good for business. Yeah. You know, so I would say that's a direction that we're starting to head. That's pretty positive for a lot of people.
Yeah, coming from the golf world, I was telling Darryl earlier that, you know, I started with TPI, their first summit in 2006, right? But so I was in early with them, and, you know, but it took so long. It's taken so long for golf pros at the club level to really accept this. And, you know, so because you recycle some of these golf pros. And I started caddying when I was 12 in 1979. The golf pro was Nelson Long. Today, the golf pro is Nelson Long. I mean, because it's such a great golf area that these jobs are coveted. Yeah. So, you know, the philosophies are going to stay in there for a long time. But for me, it just, you know, I forgot how young, you know, although, you know, Gary Player was working out and Tiger was in the 90s, blah, 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 but really from the perspective of the consumer and bringing it to the consumer, it's still young, golf fitness. So what are some things maybe you feel like we're doing right out there?
Well, I kind of what you guys are saying about the whole piece about education, more people are starting to understand the why, you know, specifically for USA Hockey, the whole idea of putting all this money into American development model. Yeah. The national governing body is saying, okay, you know, at this age, this is trainable. At this age, this is trainable. There's windows of trainability, and there's the right thing at the right time. There's a right number of games to play. There's a right number of practices to have. And, you know, for little kids, like kids that are 10 years old and younger especially, USA Hockey is saying, don't play hockey. In the summertime, go play something else.
That's awesome.
You know, they're not only advocating kids to participate in year-round ice hockey. It's coming from, you know, the highest organizational level. Go play lacrosse, go play baseball, go play soccer, go play football.
Yep.
So I think that's something we're really starting to get it right is the education piece and the information piece. And what's, I think the transition that's already started to happen is, now we're starting to get to where people have their kids in hockey and the kids are 14, 15 years old, and all they know is that the American development models existed. They never played hockey when there wasn't an American development model. It's to where, 10 years ago when we started, there's this new damn American development model thing, and now all of a sudden they're telling me that I shouldn't practice this much, or I shouldn't be playing 97 games with my Pee Wee team, and
same thing with
now it's not new anymore. People are accepting it as commonplace.
Yeah.
Well, Darryl, talk about your poll of the USA players too.
Yeah, they're all multi-sport athletes. All of them that make it to this level are multi-sport guys. None of them are specialized in hockey. Yeah. A little kid, Usually, for many of them, the first time they really just only play hockey is the year they come here, or maybe the year before they came here. So like 15 years old.
Yeah.
Really?
Which is actually,
that's cool.
If you look at the long-term the long-term athlete development information, probably about age 16 is when you should specialize. That's actually not early specialization, that's late specialization.
Yeah.
Growth and development is 70-80% done at that point.
Yep. And it's a good segue to Jim at IYCA, because I think one of the things that we're doing right is educating the trainers, because they're the ones with the tentacles, right? So if you train the trainers like Jim and the IYCA is doing, then we can get the word out even more. We got to get these people, the trainers, educated on this stuff.
Well, I'm just so happy to hear what Darryl just said, because to me, I don't see that long-term approach being implemented as well as it should be. So to hear that,
it has a ways to go.
It does have a long way to go. I think it's worse in other sports maybe, but so they call it the American development model in hockey, and I think USA Hockey has done a really good a service for everybody, because everyone else calls it long-term development.
USA Hockey has actually given the rights to the American development model to the United States Olympic Committee, so they can use that name for all sports.
And I think it's really started to grow. USA Football now has put out a position statement about it. So the big, like Darryl said, the big organizations are really hitting it hard. It may take another 5 or 10 years for people to cycle through, because you still have parents and coaches who are used to one thing, but that's awesome to hear that it's kind of catching. I think the good things, like you're saying, is that now more kids have access. Simply just having access to training programs that they didn't used to have. So back in 2000, you might have to drive an hour to find a decent training facility. Today you can find 20 places, and maybe it's harder to run a business, maybe because you've got so many competitors, but the pool is bigger because more people get it. So I think access is huge, and I think more and more trainers being educated not just on long-term athletic development, but how to treat kids. I think that's really kind of the next big thing. It went from just science to now more people are getting are understanding that making an impact on a kid in a positive way, and not having to ram stuff down a kid's throat, and getting them to enjoy training at a younger age it's a much bigger deal, I think, today, and I think we'll see the long-term effects of that down the road.
Yeah, cool. What about this is probably the easy one. What are some things that are bothering you about kind of the way people are training, or you're seeing some of these kids?
Yeah, well, specifically to ice hockey, I think a big problem is people are still hung up on doing endurance training. Ice hockey is not an endurance sport.
Okay.
The circuit training, I don't know what we should or shouldn't say, P90X, CrossFit type stuff, the really high rep, high fatigue type training is not really applicable to ice hockey at all, or really to any team sports. I think, but stuff like mixed martial arts gets really popular, and people see the way those guys train, and so that's how I'm going to train. Or, American Ninja Warrior, or some, I don't want to call it idiocy, but that that's popular, that's what people see, and so they try to emulate it, but they're not understanding the why. In a sport like mixed martial arts, you fight a 4 or 5 minute round, and then you get a 1 minute rest, and then you fight 4 or 5 minutes again. So if you do 4 rounds, that's 20 minutes with 4 minutes of rest. Well, in ice hockey, if a guy gets 20 minutes of ice time, that ice time is spread out over like a 2-hour and 15-minute game.
Yeah.
You know, it's a completely different animal. You're looking at, you know, work to rest ratios, and you're really looking at something that's more neuromuscular based and more speed and power oriented and not so metabolic.
Yep.
And so I think that's a real mistake that I'm seeing some of the guys that come in, you know, they're doing that kind of training. Well, I did CrossFit, or I did, you know, mixed martial arts or boxing for my cross training. And it's like, well, why? It has nothing to do with ice hockey. It's so disconnected from hockey. Like, I'll use the example, we play our domestic games in the United States Hockey League, 17-minute intermissions. So 2 intermissions, you have 34 minutes of intermission. Nobody's playing 34 minutes of ice time in the USHL. You know, well, the goalies. I always say goalies play 30 minutes because the game's relatively evenly matched. The puck's in the other team's defensive zone for half the game. So I know it's like people aren't really, you know, like they see, again, they see the how. They see kettlebells and they see free weights and they see jumps and plyometrics, and they don't understand the difference between doing, you know, 5 jumps maximally or doing 50 jumps. It's the same drill.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's kind of funny because you think, God, it's so basic, like the demands of the sport, right? Like at least the worst case scenario, let's say you do 45 on and a minute 30 off for 30 rounds.
So I don't understand, but I see, you know, especially with young kids, with teenagers, you start looking at like increasing the efficiency of their nervous system, and, you know, transitional muscle fibers getting pushed into having more fast twitch oriented characteristics. Well, it goes the other way too. If you do a lot of endurance training, you're pushing that kid to be more slow twitch oriented.
Sure.
When you want to get to like USHL level and college level ice hockey, that's not gonna. Yeah. You have to be really skilled to be a slow guy at that level.
Yeah. Jim, what do you think? What's some things that might be bothering you out there that you're maybe that you're trying to fix?
Yeah. One thing that really bothers me is that kids are so overextended now that that they don't have time to actually do enough, maybe, or something will get slipped into a practice, like they'll do a ladder drill during warm-ups, and then the parents and everybody says, well, we do speed and agility, so I don't have to do that anymore. Or they're in a weight training class and they lift, you know, twice a week at school, and during that time all they get in is bench and squat, and they're like, well, I do lift weights, and so I feel like that kind of messes things up a little bit. I guess just that overextending goes into their lives too, because everything that kids do now is structured. Kids don't go out and play that much anymore. They have to have it organized by an adult, and there has to be somebody there telling them what to do. And I mean, a basketball player that I trained when he was in college, and he went on and did all sorts of things. He just posted a picture the other day. He took his little kid to the basketball court where he grew up in Lansing, Michigan, and he said, no one's here. And he said, I learned so many things about life.
Yeah, it used to be packed
here. And everybody was packed this court, and no one's here, and it's too bad. And it's the same way, you know, all over the place. So now when I see my youngest kid, who's only 9, out on the trampoline, and then, you know, 20 minutes later they're running around playing some game they made up, and then they're gonna go throw a ball against the backboard on the basketball hoop, you know, and I don't want to stop that and say, oh, we need to go to practice. You know, because I think, I'm like, keep going and get more kids, you know, like they need, I feel like, more of that. But it's hard as a parent to see your kid just playing around and having a good time when his friends are at some elite club level, you know, training session, getting ahead in whatever sport. And, you know, a lot of parents start freaking out. They're like, is my kid even going to make the high school team? Like, are we going to make the you know, whatever team later on? I think it's hard for parents, honestly, to navigate. And I think as much education as we've done for trainers, I know for the IYCA, one of the next frontiers is educating parents. Because they need it.
Scratch the surface.
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface right now.
Part of the, you know, the whole education thing too is people talk about, you know, high performance and elite and this and that. Well, none of those things exist with kids. There's no such thing as an elite kid. Kids
yes, there are. They call our place all the time.
There you go.
You know, like high performance doesn't happen until like pro sports or the Olympics. That's high performance.
Yeah.
You know, like National Team Development Program or the USHL or NCAA athletics, that's kind of high performance.
Yeah.
You know, that's not high performance.
Yeah.
The Olympics is high performance.
Yeah. What about you? What are you thinking, you know, in terms of some of these kids that come in that maybe frustrate you?
For me, and if anybody follows our social media channel, again, that's just the opinion machine, putting it out there, and you know, you can call it a brand as a business owner.
Yeah.
Our brand is built on multi-sport athletes. So anytime there's a article that comes out, share it right out. And I guess it's because of my background, you know, and we have kids now that are, and I think, like you said, you're spot on with you know, well, if they don't play spring hockey, then they might not make the fall team. AAA around here is horrendous in terms of that. So you know, they finish their season in April. Tryouts are the next week.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all.
And then you got to play spring
And
hockey.
they feel like they got to be out there.
It's dumb on two fronts though, because if tryouts is right after the season ends, then if you make the team, there's no incentive to work hard in the off season or anything because you're already on the team. And if you don't make the team, there's no incentive to work hard because there's nothing to try out for.
Yeah.
You know, there's no gap between the end of the season and tryouts. There's no room for anybody to change.
But you know, in others, like let's take basketball or soccer or whatever other season you can play, you learn give and goes, you learn spatial awareness, you're learning all of these things that happen in other sports.
Sure.
So it's not like you're like, oh, well, you can be way behind. You're learning to read plays. You're learning to read the game, which is, you know, 85% of it.
Team sports are keep away. All team sports are keep away.
Yeah. Create space and keep away.
Yeah. Going on that same vein too is, you know, when kids play, again, I'm pretty hockey centric, but kids play spring hockey and summer hockey. Well, that's not really the same competitiveness of hockey as your regular winter team. And I would say one issue for us with players coming in is they really don't understand how to compete. You know, when you get to like the USHL, it's a little bit different animal. Playing against college teams, it's a different animal. When you're playing, you know, the Swedes and the Russians and the Canadians national team, it's competitiveness takes on a new meaning. And where if you're playing different sports and you're in that sport's true in season, it's competitive. When you play hockey in the winter, it's competitive. When you play hockey in the summer, it's really not that competitive. You know, if you did like wrestling or you played hoops in the winter, then that would be competitive. If you do soccer or football in the fall, it's competitive. You know, it's at the most competitive part of that sports year. And so I think that's a big disconnect is it doesn't make the kids competitive. It doesn't make them competitors.
And I guess a lot of it too is like for me, what I've seen is some of the financial end of it, right? Is these programs, like I got a kid who is a really good hockey player. He's elite. You know, he's really, really good. He's doing the whole thing, the year-round type of stuff, and he takes off. He's an incredible baseball player too. So just a great kid. But one of the things I don't love, and his dad's going to watch this and probably call me, but is he has a great guy who does hockey skills on Monday, but they do some dry land too. And one of the things I always had a problem in the golf world was all these golf pros would go to TPI and get their first certification, and then they would go back to the course because they don't want to send anybody anywhere. They're like, hey, we're doing a fitness program over here, you know, like you're a golf pro. Like that's like me showing people how to golf in my facility. And so I feel like, I'm not saying that this guy wouldn't know some stuff, but I feel like, look, let's pick a role and work as a team, you know. And I think with kids and the money, that's what ends up really becoming a barrier too. So
I know Jim and I have kids that shuttle back and forth between the two facilities throughout the summer. We're starting to now, where we have guys that are like, well, we can't do those days because we're out at Total Performance doing speed and agility stuff, and then we come to you for the strength training stuff. And you know, everybody falls into their be good at something, be really good at something. You know, so I'm happy to have him do that because I'm not fast or agile, and I don't know how to teach people that. So let's talk about. We'll finish up with
We'll save Jim for last because there might be some good IYCA stuff and what they're. Maybe he'll let us in on some secrets. But some things you'd like to see moving for the future. Like what are some ways we can fix whatever's happening? Just kind of like a summary of what we just all talked about.
I mean, I think it comes down to some organization has to get proactive with, because ultimately, like, organizations are saying, well, we don't want to be the first one to step back from having the 3-season or 4-season thing, because then people are just going to leave and go somewhere else. And similar, like what you said before we started filming, it has to be everybody's like, okay, ready, go. All right. So, so that it doesn't leave options of you know, and this is just on what we just talked about, that multi-season thing. It takes a big push in a town, in a whole town, or fewer options to begin with, but it takes a big push in a town for everybody to say, okay, hockey season's over.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Let's shut the rinks.
Good luck to you.
Yeah, that'd be.
Yeah.
Not going to happen in Detroit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
You know, I don't know. I think, you know, we definitely need to continue and improve the educational stuff that we've been doing. I think is the biggest key to that, because if people don't understand the why, you're doing stuff and they're never going to want to change.
Yep.
You know, kind of what Brian talked about. I think USA Hockey has taken some steps, you know, with the putting the American Developmental stuff in place, and, like, you know, they took the body checking out of little kid hockey. You know, they raised the age. They got rid of Pee-wee national championships and a national championship for Pee-wees anymore. You know,
great. Yeah,
they were saying, you know, you look back at the kids that won nationals when they were Pee-wees, and none of them were even making it to juniors. We were just making them into really good Pee-wees.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were skipping all the other, so, you know, athlete development and windows of trainability and all that. So, you know, there are some good things in place, but you can't lose that momentum. Like, you have to keep snowballing it and trying to build it. And I think the other problem is, you know, when we do accomplish something and we say, oh yeah, that's great, we did that, you know, we pat ourselves on the back, you don't realize is 2 years later, all those kids and all those parents are gone. And you have a whole new group of, you know, whatever, people that are playing 12U hockey now that don't know all the stuff that you taught the other 12U families. So there needs to be something in place where you can sustain the effort, so that every time you get a new crop in, people know what's the correct way to do things. Yeah. So the education really needs to be sustained.
Jim?
Well, kind of going off of something you said earlier, Anthony, was it hit me that I think that high schools are really becoming a bigger part of the whole strength and conditioning scene, and more high schools are hiring qualified strength coaches and taking it away from sport coaches who think that they know how to do things and only have the interest of their team, or, you know, or their sport or whatever it is in mind. And I'm not bashing those coaches. Like, God bless them for even spending the time in those weight rooms. Like, it's amazing, you know, how many coaches that are now, you know, 70 years old spent all off season in the weight room for free, you know, like not getting paid a dime and being in there trying to help kids. But I think we're beyond that now, and I think now hire somebody that actually knows what they're doing to be in there. And if you have the money, make sure it's a good hire. You know, make sure now that you have a qualified person in there, because there are so many people out there that are qualified that don't have jobs in the profession, that, you know, hopefully this kind of trickles in somehow. I don't know how it's going to go, because it's a funding issue, but that does bring up that other thing that I think is kind of interesting, is there are so many more students trying to get into the strength and conditioning profession than ever before. I remember when I was in college, I wanted to learn how to be a strength coach, and I had to do an independent study, and none of my professors had could give me any direction.
Wow. I was in the same situation.
And today, you know, a kid says, I want to be a strength coach, well, go here and go here and go here, anywhere. But now you see all these kids that want to get into the profession, and it's kind of like the golf pros. You're like, Darryl's not going anywhere because he's got a great job here. So there's no position here, you know, and I'm not leaving you know, my position at Total Performance, so there's only so many places to go, and now in NCAA football, you can only have 5 guys, so they have 5 full-time staff members, and no one else is there, so you can't have the internships in the GAs and everything. So there's this bottleneck of, there's all these kids that think they're getting into the profession, and there's nowhere for them to go.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because we were looking at trying to find an student to do an internship for next fall, and when we advertised it, everybody that applied for it was already people with master's degrees.
And
there's no place.
And they're looking for internships.
They can't find a job, so they're trying to get an internship. But it's like, well, we really want someone that's a student that's doing it for school credit. We don't want somebody that's leaving a low-paying, like part-time strength and conditioning job that's already has experience. You know, we really want it to be for a student. And there isn't any. Nobody applied for it that was a student.
But I bet you got a lot of.
Oh, we got a ton of. And it was all people that had master's degrees.
That's crazy.
Well, like you said, hopefully more high schools will start to fill that gap a little bit, right?
And I think that there needs to be more entrepreneurship. People talking about entrepreneurship and creating opportunities for themselves, kind of what Brian did. You know, and a lot of people have now done that, but there's also a lot of people that, you know, they don't know what to do, so they think they're going to start something and it fails. I mean, I can't tell you how many places I've seen go under, as we all have. So I think that that's coming too. Thank God.
There's actually schools that are mixing, you know, an exercise science or a kinesiology with an entrepreneurship program.
That's awesome.
So you take a little bit of both, or a mix, or like a mixture of business and the science classes. So that's pretty cool.
Good stuff. Well, we're heading in the right direction. I think we are. I mean, I like to see the positive. I mean, obviously, talking to so many people on Strength Coach Podcast and strengthcoach.com, and you know, being around guys like you guys, I mean, I think again it'll trickle down eventually in the good stuff that you guys are doing now at the IYCA. So don't forget, we're going to go to all of your facilities, so check out those episodes so you can check out what they're doing individually at their places. But guys, thanks for coming on today. This has been great. Talking a little bit about youth training, guys. Really appreciate it.
It's fun.
All right.